Good afternoon, everybody. Jim Williams along with Scott Rochelle, and we are here. Chris King is on assignment and shall be back on Monday. Tonight, Thursday night football, and it's going to be a good one. Kansas City taking on the Chargers, and with his back to the Arrowhead, Scott Rochelle. Scotty, it's going to be a fun time tonight.
Yeah, it feels a little bit good. I might have got my time zones mixed up because I'm here about, 6 hours before the game. I don't see
No
anybody else in
vendors yet.
attendance. No
Yeah,
vendors. I can't even get a hot
yeah,
dog, but it's nice to
yeah.
be back on the show. It should be fun for Thursday night.
Mhm.
It might be a little bit tricky for some people to actually find the game tonight, which we'll talk about in a second.
Right.
But should be solid overall for the picks yesterday. Went well. I believe we won both 2 picks with the
Yeah.
run line involved, and we lost the 4 pick. But overall, when you cash the money line 2 picks and the run line 2 picks. Solid overall day, and hopefully we'll keep it rolling again for the third straight day.
There you go. The game tonight is going to be on Amazon Prime Video. Now, what that means to you, I'll pop it up there. Amazon Prime Video. It's free to Prime customers. So if you're a customer and have Prime, I sometimes think that my house is a Amazon, fulfillment station with all the Amazon boxes around here. So yes, we are subscribers. You can download the app on your phone or on your tablet, or if you happen to have a smart TV or a Roku or a Fire Stick or an Apple TV, you can download it. It's easy to stream the game. I do find it convenient the fact that you can get it on multiple platforms, so that's cool too. So if you're not a subscriber to Amazon Prime, you've got a couple of choices. One, you can download the Prime Video, and it's $7 and change a month, but you got a 30-day trial, so you could take it for a free ride tonight and tomorrow and see what you think about it. Otherwise, that's it. Now you can watch it. Most sports establishments will be playing it tonight as well. So it's a new thing, and but it's they spent $1 billion on an 11-year contract, so that's $1 billion a year for 11 years. So they're putting a heavy duty investment in it. Al Michaels, Kirk Herbstreit are going to be calling the game. Freddie Gardelli, who produced the NBC games, has moved over and he's producing the game. So you got a good quality team on board. We're just going to have to get used to where we find it. That's all.
Yep, definitely should be entertaining.
Mhm.
Anything you're particularly looking for involved in the game, or you're just excited that it should be a competitive matchup?
I want to see the Chargers. I mean, I want to see if they live up to billing, right?
Mhm.
If they're going to win the division and going to become a Super Bowl, challenger, there's no better place to try that than in that building that you're behind right now.
Yeah.
Arrowhead is a loud and crazy place, and it's one of those places where the crowd makes a difference, and they're going to be loud, and because they always are.
It's also the
And
first home game of the season. So
right, so you got that. So you got two things going, and the Chargers, did some serious off-season tooling, and you know, there's no reason to believe they can't be a competitive team in that division, but you got to go in, as the old saying goes, you got to knock off the champ before you can get there.
yep.
And that's going to be an interesting situation. Your thoughts on tonight's game, or shall we wait to the panels till we get there?
Well, just in general, I don't actually think I have any plays on the football game for the
Hmm.
parlays. I ended up flipping a little bit on the total. Total at first glance seems very low at roughly
Hmm.
54 with these quarterbacks. I
Hmm.
actually kind of like the under, being a bit contrarian here. We've seen primetime games tend to fly under, but I do think the Chargers will have to try to do a good job of actually maintaining possession of the ball, and they might have to keep Mahomes off the field. I know people will blindly take the over, but the Chargers offense really looked solid if you watched them play, but then you looked at the scoreboard and they only scored about 24 points. So they had a hard time of closing out drives. I am curious if the defense will look sharper. I'm not sure how good Kansas City's offense was in week one or how
Hmm.
bad Arizona's defense was in week one. Probably a
Right.
mix of the two, but the Chargers can rush the passer. We saw Bosa and Mack really do whatever they wanted against the
Hmm.
Raiders' offensive line. I think that'll be the story of the game, but I think the
Hmm.
Chargers will be able to generate pressure And as a result, Kansas City might struggle to reach 30 plus once again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of leaning to the under. As for the side, I know that everybody loves the Chiefs. And if you want to go contrarian, the Chargers are the play. I'm still leaning to the Chiefs. I just think at Arrowhead, they're going to be dialed in. No Keenan Allen for the Chargers, which is a big deal. And Mike Williams, as Andrew just mentioned, should be a bigger factor. The issue is you can't really trust him in a week in, week out basis.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the Chiefs more. I trust them more. They're at home. I'll go with the Chiefs in the under. The under I'm really not strong about, but I'm going to lean that way to be a little bit contrarian. I do
Mm-hmm.
think, though, you're going to end up seeing some turnovers that are going to be costly for the Chargers, maybe a couple of failed fourth down conversions. I am going to go with the Chiefs, though. I think they're just a much better team.
I can't fault that, and the fact that they're at home does make for a very important. They're one of those teams where home field advantage actually is an advantage.
Yeah.
And look, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, they just roll out of bed ready to win,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's a very, very important part of it. So we'll see how things play out, but I wouldn't disagree with you there, Scott. Let's take a second and thank our sponsor, Caesar Sportsbook. They have a great deal for first-time users. Get up to $1,250 free bet insurance. Download the app and use it today. And as we said, Scott's been giving you some tips on what to do and how to handle, your free bet insurance. Any other tips today, Scotty, before we move on?
Not really. My main other
Okay.
piece of advice would be if you're going to bet on a game with a free bet or for a
Mm-hmm.
risk-free bet, don't just blindly bet the game on TV or the game that you're
Right.
going to watch. I get it's fun to watch your bets actually play themselves out. Care
Mm-hmm.
more about the actual betting angle and whether you're going to win than blindly
Mm-hmm.
betting on something just because you can watch.
Right. Always check your state's age limits. Some have 18, some have 21. And as we say here, always bet responsibly. Okay, so that's our buddies at Caesar Sportsbook. Check them out. All the information is in the show box below. Okay. All right. So, meanwhile, back at the ranch, we've got any baseball stuff looking good for you today?
I'm going to get into that for the parlays, but it's
Okay.
pretty much entirely baseball. I tried to
Okay.
look at some EuroLeague stuff for soccer. I know
Mm-hmm.
soccer's been very good for us.
Yeah,
Holland ended up scoring. He had that crazy goal in the 82nd minute, I believe.
that was a
And we
wild
also,
one.
yeah, it was a wild one, but that cashed us a 2-pick. And we also had
Mm-hmm.
Napoli, and
Right.
they ended up winning comfortably 3-0. So
Mm-hmm.
overall, good day on the pitch.
Mm-hmm.
PSG did not come through first, though, because they gave up a goal to
Right.
Maccabi Haifa in the first half, which I did not see coming. But as a
Mm-hmm.
whole, good day on the pitch. It was a good day a couple days ago as well.
Mm-hmm.
Today, though, didn't really like much. Wasn't a fan of the matches, and some of them
Okay.
even started at like 12:45. So pretty much entirely baseball for
Mm-hmm.
today's card.
Well, you know the old saying, from a standpoint of some of the best bets you make are the ones you don't make.
That is true.
And maybe yesterday was one of those situations or today.
Mhm.
All right, so let's go jump into the two for the money.
Yeah. So going through the parlays here, starting off with the 2 for the money. First play is going to be on the Rays and Blue Jays under 7.5. At the end of the day, I like the pitchers on the mound a little bit too much. That game is taking place at around 3 p.m., so playing accordingly. But McClanahan's officially back, and he's against Gaussman. Now, Gaussman's home road splits, I will concede, are not exactly great in favor of his
Mm-hmm.
home numbers. They're not particularly good, but I do like the overall pitchers. I do think that you're going to end up seeing a bit of a rock fight here between two teams that are really just competing with each other for second
Right.
place in the division. Maybe even first place if the Yankees struggle once again. But the point is, Tampa does have its best pitcher on the mound. Gaussman's been solid. And to go through
Mm-hmm.
the actual numbers in the regular season meetings, a lot of the recent meetings have been low scoring. To read
Mm-hmm.
off some of the recent results, 6-9, 6-5, 5-4. So if you want to
Mm-hmm.
just do the math in your head, that means that 5 of the last 6 meetings have had less than 7 runs. I think
Right.
this number's a little bit high. I'm going to go with the under there at -114. And then looking at another total, I'm looking at the Royals and Twins over 8.5. I mentioned this on Total Chaos yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not a fan of Lynch at all. I'm not a fan of Bundy. I think you're going to see a lot of opportunities in a hitter's friendly ballpark at Target Field. I think
Right.
8.5 is too low. I think either team could break it open. I'm going to go with the over 8.5 there. Then pivoting to the second 2 pick is going to be the Pirates against the Mets. I'm going to take the alternative reverse run line taking the Pirates plus 2.5 runs at minus 165. At the end of the day, I'm not exactly sold in Carrasco. He's only pitched about 8 2/3 since coming back off the IL. And the
Right.
Pirates have randomly been good offensively for the past couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
Pittsburgh has scored at least 6 runs in 4 of its last 5 games. And the Mets got smacked by the Cubs over the last 2 days.
Right.
I'm not exactly sold on the Mets' current form. Plus 2.5 with a guaranteed 9 at-bats on the road, I think has value at minus 165. So I'm going to take that. And then I'm going to take the Phillies on the money line and the run line against the Marlins. At the end of the day, the Phillies are still competing for something. The Marlins are not. And to go through the pitching matchup there, Pablo Lopez has really not been great lately. Syndergaard's been okay, but the Phillies have dominated the regular season meetings as the Phillies are 12-6 straight up. So you're going to give me minus 140 with the better starting pitcher based on current form. Miami, we know, cannot hit, especially at home. I'll take the Phillies on the money line there and the run line at plus 125. So for the payouts there, the first one is just 2 totals, so no overall differential between money line and run lines. That pays out at plus 244. And as for the money line and the run line bets on the second one, of course, you do have a discrepancy there between the Phillies money line and the run line. I still like both, though, and I think you're going to end up finding yourself in a pretty solid spot to potentially cash both tonight.
Very good. Guys, I see you've got some questions on the game site. We will get to them a little bit later. Let's move on to the 4.
So moving on to the 4 pick here, you have the Royals and Twins I doubled down on for the over 8.5. I really just don't like either pitcher. I think you're getting yourself a pretty good deal no matter how you slice it. Plus, you have a 4-4 extra inning draw. So if each team gets the 4, you automatically win. Then I like the Cardinals on the money line and the run line against the Reds. You have Mikolas going up against Chase Anderson. I can't believe Anderson is still in the league. Cardinals had a nice win there with Wainwright yesterday. Killed me personally, but it was a nice win for them. But I do like Mikolas. He's been pitching pretty well at home recently, and Anderson cannot pitch. I'll take the Cardinals to win that game comfortably. Then looking at the Astros and the A's, I'm not sure if Jordan's going to go in this one. He missed yesterday's game with an injury, but Houston's been dominant. Oakland, we know, is a terrible team. Houston at home is also 47-22. You have McCullers against Caprillion. McCullers been very solid since he came back this season. I like him there. And I'm going to mention the Pirates team total over 2.5 runs at minus 130 against the Mets. I mentioned Carrasco. His overall numbers are decent, but he really has barely pitched in the past month. And the Pirates offensively have scored 6+ runs in 4 of the last 5 games. With a guaranteed 9 at-bats on the road, I think 2.5 for a team total is a little bit low. I'm going to go with the over there. And that payout for the money line is plus 482, and for the run line is plus 862. But I do think you'll find some value there. And I once again said it's going to be a lot of baseball. And I can cover some of the football stuff in a second. But that's where I thought the most value was available. There were a couple player props I was tempted by for the football game. I was looking at Mahomes' rushing yards, which I thought was a little bit low. My favorite overall prop was actually Hardman. I like him under 35.5 receiving yards. I thought the number was way too high. And if you go through his workload in week 1, he had a touchdown. He also had basically 16 yards receiving, so he really didn't play much of a factor. But a fun fact here, since the Chiefs do play the Chargers twice every year, Hardman, in about 7 games, I believe, against the Chargers, 6 or 7, he's never gone over 33 for receiving yards. So I thought the number was too high. I believe it was 37.5. It's been bet down to 35.5. I still like the under because he played basically 56% of the snaps in week 1. He's basically the wide receiver 4 on this team. And if you look at what Hardman's role is, he's basically what? A screen pass guy or the occasional snap, like immediate handoff jet sweep guy?
He's your red zone guy.
He's a gadget player, the way that I see it. So I thought that the number for 35.5 was just too high because all of his catches are basically behind the line of scrimmage. He's just going to catch some end arounds, maybe that quick little snap, like end around, technically a pass. You throw it forward with 2 hands. That's really it. Does Hardman run many good routes?
Like the bubble screen type stuff.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. So I think the Chargers will be able to contain him because they've contained him his entire career. I just thought that number was too high, so I like the under there.
Couple of random thoughts on the St. Louis yesterday. Of course, they had their record with Molina
Wainwright.
and
Yeah.
Wainwright pitching. That was kind of cool. And with the Houston Astros, personal experience situation, um, I actually coached with uh, Lance McCullers' grandfather. His father played baseball with my brother. And so Lance McCullers Jr. and the McCullers family has long been friends of ours. And I couldn't be happier to see Lance doing well. Certainly with the Astros and, doing well in the bigs. So good on you, Lance. Let's go out there and win one against the Astros, win one from, Scott Rochelle and everybody else out here.
Yeah, McCullers the guy that I've liked since he came into the league. The
Mhm.
issue has been injuries. He's
Right.
constantly been on the IL, but you look at his
Right.
stuff. I'm a big fan of his off-speed stuff. Very,
Right.
very, very solid movement, and we even saw him have some value coming
Mhm.
off the IL in the bullpen and some playoff runs in the past. So he's
Mhm.
been known to put together some good performances. I'm happy that he's been able to regain some of the stamina it takes to be a starter, because when
Sure.
you kind of spend that much time being either a fringe bullpen guy or just being injured, it's nice to see him go basically 6 innings per outing. But he's been
Yeah.
solid. 28 and 2/3 innings pitched,
Mhm.
2.2 ERA. He's only given up 2 home runs as well, so he's been able to
Right.
limit the long ball. I just think he's a good pitcher. And I think
Yeah.
that against Oakland's terrible offense, with Houston being at home, I
Right.
kind of wish Jordan was playing. So you can't always get what you want.
Right.
But, we're hoping Houston can do enough in order to get the job done.
Hey, let's fly through some of these football questions. Here's the first one. What do you think about Herbert getting a touchdown tonight?
So I want to pull up the odds on that. At first
Mhm.
glance, I was actually in favor of the over in rushing yards for both
Mhm.
quarterbacks. Herbert, we know, is extremely mobile, and the Chargers also don't exactly have a goal line back per se. Kind
Mhm.
of the same with the Chiefs. The Chiefs used Hilaire in the passing game, but they
Right.
really don't run the ball that much in the red zone. When you
Right.
have Mahomes, why would you? I mean, let's just be honest.
Right.
But Herbert, you're looking at what the Chargers have. They have Spiller, they have Kelly. Eckler's their main running back. He's not exactly a
Mhm.
big body by any means.
Mhm.
So could I see Herbert pulling one down, maybe scrambling, or even just a QB sneak? I
Right.
can see that. And if you want to look at the overall price for that, I think it's actually a pretty favorable price. I know
Mhm.
Mahomes' anytime score was roughly 4-1. I thought
Right.
that was kind of tempting. Herbert's around 360, so it's basically the same for both. I don't
Mhm.
mind it. I think there are worse flyers to take at
Mhm.
roughly 4-1. I think
Right.
you could have an opportunity where it ends up reaching the end zone.
Absolutely. Okay, let's go now to Rye, our buddy. He thinks they're going to spy on him tonight.
I think it might vary. It really comes down to what the Chiefs want to do or what they prioritize,
Right.
because the Chiefs want to really just pressure Herbert and keep him uncomfortable. So I do think
Mhm.
you're going to end up seeing a lot of opportunities where Herbert could hypothetically be in a position where he could run. Even if
Mhm.
you have a spy, there's always
Right.
a chance that he just outruns the spy. I mean, Herbert's a very good athlete. He could
Right.
get out of the pocket. We've seen Herbert take it down and run. So are they going to spy every play? Probably not. Are they going to spy some plays? Maybe. But we've seen a lot of teams, unless you're playing Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray,
Okay.
they usually wait until they get burned once or twice before they start using the spy. At some point, they'll use it. I don't think they'll use it the entire game, if I'm
Well,
guessing.
the other thing to think about with a spy and why you have to pick your moments is because when you send somebody as a spy, you're losing someone who is covering a receiver. And so, and we've seen it so many times with guys like Herbert, you mentioned Lamar Jackson. They'll pull all the way up to almost the line of scrimmage, stop as the spy comes after them. They'll dink it over their head, and
30
20
yards.
yards later,
Yeah.
they got a screen pass. So
It's very rare you see a team spy a quarterback for the entire game.
right,
You'll see some moments, usually
mm,
after being burned.
right,
Usually. But I think
right,
Herbert could break it down and potentially gain, 20 yards on a carry. It wouldn't
yeah,
surprise me. But in the red zone, Herbert's a big guy. Like, he
right,
can absorb some contact. We saw it at Oregon. They used him a lot in the
right,
red zone there. I think a touchdown there, plus 360, maybe 4 to
right,
1 shopping around for either quarterback, I think has some
right.
value.
Let's go to the next question, which is Andrew, and he Andrew likes Mike Williams.
Well, he's crushed the Chiefs in the past couple
Mm,
of years. The issue with
right,
Mike Williams is you can't really trust him on a game in, game out basis.
Mm-hmm.
It's the issue you run into when you're a pretty low volume but high yardage guy, kind of
Right.
like a Deshaun Jackson, for
Right.
example. And I know they're built differently because Williams is significantly bigger, but the
Right.
concept itself, if you're going to take a prop on Williams and
Mm-hmm.
you need him, let's just say you want to go alternative, you want to get him 100 plus receiving yards.
Right.
How many catches is he going to have in a game? Because you're kind of hoping he blindly has a long bomb for 60 something yards, which sends you over. Does Williams catch much of the underneath stuff? Not really.
That's not his play.
No, it's the balance. You have
Yeah.
Williams being the deep threat. You have Keenan
Right.
Allen handling the underneath and the intermediate stuff.
Right.
Now with Allen being out, you're assuming Carter and maybe Palmer will embrace
Right.
more of that responsibility. But Williams is really a go big or go home receiver. And we
Right.
saw in week 1, when he doesn't catch the big bomb, his stat
Mhm.
lines are underwhelming. So he's an extremely risky play if you want to
Mhm.
go for yardage. I think if you want to play it a little bit safer, maybe you can take the Mike Williams longest reception
Right.
over. Because if he's going to go over in yards, he's going to go over in longest reception.
Right. I remember when he was in Tampa Bay, Brady maybe had him targeted 4 or 5 times a game. That's about it. And it was always big. I mean, with Mike Williams, like you said, he's the home run hitter. He's the guy outside the lines and somebody who can, if he moves and gets away, he's got you. Otherwise, he's just running back and forth down the field.
Yeah, well, just to correct you, Mike Williams has been on the Chargers his entire career.
Oh,
I
I'm
think
sorry.
you're thinking of the original
Yes,
Mike Williams
I'm
from the
thinking of
Buccaneers.
right. My
Yeah.
bad. Thank you for bringing that up. I greatly appreciate
No,
that.
there was a Mike Williams on Tampa Bay. It's just a different one.
Different guy.
Yeah.
My bad. So, did Juju Schuster at all play in much in the first game?
Yeah, he played a decent amount. He's
Right.
basically embraced the Keenan or Carter role for the team.
Right.
He's solely the underneath guy. He's going to
Right.
give you the underneath drag route, slant route stuff, and he's kind of the perfect balance to a Valdez Scantling.
Right.
Now, of course, Mike Williams is a much better receiver than Scantling, but
Mhm.
based on the actual roles of the team, pretty similar pros and cons. Because if
Mhm.
Scantling's going to go over 80 yards in a single game, he's
Right.
probably catching a 60-yard touchdown.
Well,
Probably.
Juju Schuster is very good at running those, under routes and move the chain kind of guy.
Yeah, and he showed that in week 1. He had like 6
Mhm.
catches for like 60 yards and change. I can
Mhm.
see a similar story here. The Chiefs don't have a number 1, but they
Mhm.
do have a very nice amount of complementary receivers, and you're
Mhm.
hoping collectively they can replace the workload or the actual stats of Tyreek. It
Right.
worked well in week 1. You're kind of just hoping the Chiefs are going to keep embracing we don't know who exactly to focus on. Of course, he got
Right.
Kelsey, but the point is,
Right.
if you can spread the wealth, and we saw
Mhm.
Hilaire get involved in the backfield, they're very difficult to cover.
Well, that's kind of an Andy Reid trademark, is having, a bunch of receivers who are, not necessarily does he have the star.
It's the
He
whole
has
being
he's
greater
had
than the sum of the parts.
right. And Andy's theory is spread the ball around and then you don't know who to cover.
Correct.
You
And
got
having Kelsey helps because he's arguably the best
Oh, yeah.
receiving tight end of all time. You could
Mhm.
argue him, Gronk, or Tony Gonzalez, but still, maybe even if you want to give a shout out to Antonio Gates, you can make an argument.
Yeah.
But still, point is, I just think the Chiefs have a little bit too many weapons. Keenan
Mhm.
being out's a big deal for that
Right.
team because Keenan's been a franchise wide receiver who's just been extremely consistent
Mhm.
his entire career, and he's the safety valve for this
Right.
team. I think with him being out, you're assuming the Chiefs probably scored 27 points in this game.
Right.
Do I think that it's going to impact the Chargers' ability to move the chains when their
Mhm.
number 1 possession receiver is out? I think
Mhm.
that's going to be a problem for the Chargers over these 60 minutes.
Rye wants to know about Travis Kelsey, and a lot of tickets are out on him for props at the moment.
Well, of course they're going to be because he had a phenomenal week 1. He's been
Right.
unstoppable for 3-4 years.
Mhm.
However, I'm sure Steen would tell you this because he's a Chiefs fan. Travis Kelsey had that big game in overtime against the Chargers, went for like 170-something yards. It was unreal.
Right.
However, the main reason why he was able to be so successful was the injury to Derwin James. And
Mhm.
Derwin James, who's a phenomenal safety, I loved him at
Right.
Florida State, He can't stay healthy. That's the main problem. But
Right.
he did a great job of covering Kelsey in the early stages of
Mhm.
last year's Thursday night game. And then he
Mhm.
got hurt, and Kelsey ran free for the final basically 2 quarters.
Mhm.
So I'm actually a little bit passive on Kelsey tonight because I know Derwin can hang with them, and I saw it
Mhm.
last year. People are going to blindly bet the over. If you want to go contrarian, I don't necessarily hate it, but I do think people will just blindly look at the stats and say,
Mhm.
"Oh, Kelsey's going for 150 tonight." I don't see it that way. I
Right.
think that Derwin James can do enough as a disruptor and as a
Mhm.
physical presence at the line of scrimmage to maybe make Kelsey a little bit overvalued in the marketplace in
Mhm.
terms of props.
What do you think about running game? Is there going to be any either team going to establish some sort of running game? Because neither of them have tried the first game of the
Well, you're assuming the Chargers would be more likely to do that than the Chiefs
year. Right.
because the Chargers without Keenan, once again,
Mhm.
might have to
Right.
pivot a little bit. And Eckler, you can make it's not even an argument. I think it's just true. He's the
Mhm.
most dynamic playmaker on that team.
Mhm.
So if you want to get the ball in his hands, and you can argue that even if it's not the run game per se,
Right.
Eckler might line up as a wide receiver in a couple of these formations because
Mhm.
we know Eckler's a good pass catcher. He might be able to end up being used in the slot. And I think you could
Mhm.
see a pretty decent spot for Eckler in PPR formats in fantasy or even just receiving yards to go over because you might be looking at a spot where they might have to force feed him a bit. The Chiefs, though, I mean, after what you saw in week 1,
Mhm.
why would you ever run the ball? I mean, Mahomes is so damn good. Like, why would you
Yeah.
ever try to run the ball with this team?
Well, first of all, you wouldn't, and second of all, I think you hit on the part they can't. So,
Yeah, and
you
Hilaire still scored 2 touchdowns receiving
right.
wise. I saw him to score a touchdown in this game is like plus 125. I
Right.
like that value. We saw Hilaire, even if he wasn't getting carries, he was
Mhm.
still the main running back in the red
Mhm.
zone. And
Right.
whether they throw it to him or whether he maybe gets a goal line carry, I think
Mhm.
Hilaire at plus money for a guy that got that many red zone reps, it's a
Mhm.
decent value play at plus money.
No, 100%. Any other questions, boys and girls out there?
I see a statement from Andrew about Triple G in boxing
Okay.
being plus 410 this weekend.
There it is.
I personally think Canelo's going to win. Triple G is one of my favorite all-time fighters. I thought he won the first fight and got robbed, but he's a lot older. And Canelo ended up gaining weight, lost, and now he gets to move down a little bit. I think Canelo's probably going to win, is mostly because Triple G's past his prime at this point. I hope I'm wrong. I love
Mhm.
Triple G. Plus 410 does seem a bit right if I had to price it myself. I was happy in boxing news, though, because apparently you have an agreement between Crawford and Spence to
Mhm.
actually fight for once. It's about damn time. We've been waiting
Yeah.
for it for about 4 years, but
Right.
that's definitely exciting. I'm still annoyed that Fury's fighting against Joshua instead
Mhm.
of Usyk, which I think is ridiculous, but still, couple of good boxing fights. I think Fury takes Joshua's head off. I think you're going to see Canelo win by decision. And I think based on the new main fight to keep an eye on between Spence and Crawford, I have no idea. I think that fight could go either way. That's the fight I'm the most excited about on the horizon.
I'll tell you what. When we get closer to those matches, I will have Joseph Hammond available to you guys. Joseph covers boxing all over the world. He's based in London, and he is an absolute wealth of boxing knowledge, and he loves breaking down fights. So think about this: a guy who's a Rhodes Scholar, who, oh, by the way, just happened to be an amateur boxer. So
Yeah.
it is a very interesting thing, but you know boxing at times gets overshadowed by the UFC, and I'm not a big UFC fan. Not that no shade on them. Dana White does good work, but
The
I do
promoting
think the
definitely
boxing.
helps. The UFC does
Oh,
a great job of
100%.
promoting its fighters, and the main issue you
Mm-hmm,
run into with boxing for the last X amount of years,
mm-hmm,
all the good fighters dodge each other. You
mm-hmm.
never get the fights you actually want until it's about 5 or 6 years too late.
Right,
Prime candidate, Mayweather Pacquiao. If you
right.
want to talk about pay-per-view, that's one of the biggest fights of all time,
Sure.
and the fight sucked because you
Yeah,
wanted the fight 5 years ago.
right.
And Mayweather is naturally a boring fighter. I've never been a big
Mm-hmm,
fan of him. I recognize how successful he is and how good he is at what he does. But the
mm-hmm,
point is, you're looking at knockouts. People want to see finishes.
mm-hmm.
The heavyweight divisions, been basically dead
Oh
for.
my God.
I know Fury's phenomenal. I get it, but
Right.
you had a long gap there where the Klitschko's held every belt, and they
Right.
were boring, and
Hmm.
people in America didn't really want to root for the Russian guys.
Right.
I think that the fact that there weren't many homegrown American quality heavyweight boxers
Hmm.
really killed the market in the United States. I don't think people
Right.
really cared that much. And even Fury, people like him. He's still British.
Right.
Fury and Wilder. Wilder was an American guy
Hmm.
who was being heralded as that next up and coming guy.
Right.
Great power. I didn't think he was a great technical boxer per
Hmm.
se. And I think Usyk would beat the crap out of him if they ended up fighting.
Right.
But if you want to talk about domestically, the U.S. has really done terribly in the heavyweight division, which
Hmm.
was the main moneymaker for boxing. And
Hmm.
that's why a lot of people pivoted to the UFC because you wanted to see stoppages. And the
Right.
main homegrown champion was Mayweather, and his fights were boring as hell.
Right.
So people pivoted. Am I reading
Right.
into it a bit too much, or do you agree a little bit with
No,
that?
I agree. I think there's no question that that the certainly the middleweights and the lesser than everything under light heavyweight
Yeah,
seem to fade away in the United States. Lennox Lewis, we're talking about.
and he's
Uh,
also British.
yeah, he's a fantastic fighter,
Yeah,
but
and Lewis is most well known for beating the corpse of Tyson.
right, pretty
That was like
much,
his main moment, which tells you how big of a deal Tyson was in America because
right,
Tyson was well past his prime, and
right,
people still thought that Tyson would beat him because he's
hmm,
Mike Tyson. And
right,
Lewis absolutely smacked the crap out of him. But Tyson was really the last American heavyweight that people were excited about because
mhm.
I don't think many Americans actually liked Holyfield
No, which is odd. He
because
was a
people liked Tyson. He was his arch
yeah,
rival. But so many
right,
people liked Tyson that when Holyfield was winning and when he was doing his thing,
mhm.
a lot of Americans really didn't care.
Yeah, and as I say, the interesting thing about it, it was almost like the Larry Holmes thing, right? Larry Holmes got no respect after he beat Muhammad Ali and
Wasn't
made
his fault. He was calling for the
no,
fight to be off,
right,
and the ref let him get his brain
right,
beaten in. I mean, I don't know
right.
what you want him to do
So
there.
it wasn't his fault, but the point being that you have two guys who were very good um, human beings, besides being great fighters, who never got their just rewards because they were thought of, as the guy who beat, my favorite boxer,
Yeah, and
and
Holyfield beat Tyson, but
yeah,
if I asked you what's the most memorable moment of Holyfield's career, it's
hmm,
his ear getting bitten off. I'm just being
yeah,
honest. He had a lot of big
yeah,
wins. He had a lot of very solid fights. Beat
right,
Tommy Morrison. He fought Bo, I believe, a couple of
hmm,
times.
sure,
Hell of a fighter. But people never really gravitated to Holyfield
hmm,
because he was a very technically sound boxer. But people wanted to see Tyson knockouts. They wanted to see
hmm,
people get decapitated. That was not really Holyfield's style.
right. I was doing the Jerry Glanville show in Atlanta, and Holyfield was in the hotel where we were doing it from. And he came by and just wanted to watch. And he's
Yeah.
like, "Come on, champ, we'll get you up there." He's, "Nah, just." And when you go to shake his hand, your hand disappears. I mean, I've
Mhm.
never seen a guy with bigger hands than Evander Holyfield, but just a straight up nice guy.
He's
And
an
then about
all-time great boxer.
yeah,
He was just always disrespected because
yeah,
people always seem to if I was breaking down American boxing at that time,
mhm,
I would say 85% of people were in
mhm,
Tyson's camp.
right.
Would you give that numbers fair? Because it feels
Yeah,
like
I think
everybody loved Tyson
it.
back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, no, I think that he was one of those people you either loved him or hated him. There was very few people in the middle of that.
Yeah, and he was the
And
arch rival of
right,
everybody else's favorite
right,
boxer, so people
right.
automatically hated Holyfield.
Right. So, Tyson was that guy and people liked him, despite his foibles. And that's just the way it is. Right now, I mean, pretty much most of the divisions are Latino fighters in the lower, in the lower weight categories. And we haven't really had, we've had some decent middleweight fights, but no,
Yeah,
the
we
heavyweights
had a
are gone.
champion. We had a champion though. Lopez ended up upsetting
Right.
Lomachenko, and then
Right.
he immediately lost his belt to the Australian guy, Cambazos, I believe is his
Right.
name. I
Yeah.
think
From
so.
Bazos. Yeah.
We had an American champion in that weight class for I don't know a cup of coffee, and
I
then he
was just
lost the
there
belt
for an hour.
immediately.
Yeah.
But you're
Yeah.
looking at most of the weight classes, and no matter
Hmm.
how good the American fighters are, heavyweight will always move the needle. It
Sure.
always will.
Hmm.
So
I just think that you know, right now people are not into boxing. I'm talking about people who create athletes
yeah,
or
because
want to
people
become
want to
pro
see
athletes.
highlights. They don't want to see
Hmm.
people hug. And that's why
Right.
heavyweight was so successful for boxing, why it's the most important weight class. For the
Hmm.
UFC, since you can win in a variety of ways, and there's
Right.
basically guaranteed carnage because you
Right.
lock them in a cage and they're
Right.
actually allowed to wrestle each other, and there's other
Right.
aspects of it. I just think people like the UFC more because Dana White actually lets the star fighters fight against each other
Right.
all the time.
Encourages it. Yeah.
And you have a lot of more stoppages because you can stop people in a variety of ways. But it's mostly boxing doing a terrible job of preserving the wholly undefeated record as
Right.
opposed to actually beating people worth a damn. And when you see great fighters fight tomato
Mhm.
cans to pad the record, when there's a
Right.
clear super fight to make for 3 to
Right.
5 years and it doesn't happen, boxing fans get pissed.
You can say what you want about, you know, Don King and about Lou Duva and some of the other promoters of their
There were big
time,
fights all the time.
but they always had big fights. They didn't shy away from big fights.
Well, they
They
needed
put,
big fights because Don King would
yeah,
take all their money, but they still
right,
they still had to have the big fights.
right,
But when you think of high profile boxing fights
right,
in the 80s and 90s compared to now,
right,
the number is a fraction of what it used to be in the 80s and
right,
90s. I mean, even in other
mhm,
weight classes, you had Sugar Ray Leonard, you had
right.
so many great fighters
Tommy
in
Hearns,
Tommy Hearns, you had
right,
Hagler, you had a lot of options here, Duran, you had a lot of people in different weight classes that would just go out and kill each other. And
Alexis Arguello,
nowadays, how
yeah,
many serious must-watch boxing fights do you have nowadays? Like 3 a year?
if you're lucky,
If you're lucky. Back in the
yeah.
80s and 90s, it felt like you had 3 per month.
Well, I can tell you that it was probably an average of 3 super fights to 4 super fights a year, and they were spaced out quarterly.
Yeah,
So that way was it.
in a
Uh,
variety of weight classes. But Andrew,
right,
yeah, that's kind of why we
exactly.
talked about it. I brought
Right,
up Crawford and Spence agreeing to
right,
fight each other in November. That's one of those fights that I
right,
think is must watch. I think
right.
that's a must watch fight if you're a fan of boxing.
Hmm.
I thought the Wilder Fury fight, the third one, I
Hmm.
thought Fury was going to kick his ass. I had a lot of money on Fury. It was entertaining. It was a good fight. But I guess you can call that must watch. I had no interest in watching Fury Usyk. I think
Right,
not Fury Usyk, sorry, in watching Joshua Usyk. I think
right.
Joshua is a highly overrated fighter. And
Hmm.
you also have a lot of streaming services like
Hmm.
DAZN and all these other places.
Right,
You can't really watch most of these fights.
right.
So that's an issue in itself.
It's I know that that Showtime did a very good job of trying to get to jumpstart boxing, but it hasn't yet paid off for them.
No.
They hold a lot of the events over at the Barclay Center
Mhm.
um, for many years. But yeah, I mean, it's not the back when I was doing fights, I did Alexis Arguello and Boom Boom Mancini, who Mancini would cut if you just tap gloves at the
Mhm.
beginning of the game of the fight. And then Hearns and Hagler and Hearns and Sugar Ray Leonard. Uh, they were, those guys didn't shy away from fighting 2 or 3 times a year.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's going on, but it is what it is, and
The
we'll
promoters
go
just
from there.
shifted priority. They would rather have the claim to the number one pound for
Right.
pound fighter just based on resume instead of actually fighting the best of the best to
Mhm.
prove who's the best. Because once your star fighter, your
Mhm.
golden ticket loses,
Right.
you can't regain that stock.
I got one real quick story for you on this, and we'll put the button on the boxing. David Hill, who was at the time was president of Fox Sports, was going over his cable bill,
Okay.
and he saw a pay per view for like 67, $68.
Mhm.
So he goes to his son. He goes, we have I gave you the key point to get in case you want to pick
Mhm.
one of our boxing matches up. And he said, "No, Dad, I didn't want to watch the boxing. I was watching UFC."
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
he says, so David goes, "You know what? It was that moment I realized if my kid who we're paying, whose lifestyle is being paid for by, Fox Sports, and he doesn't want our product, then perhaps we should talk to Dana White about his.
Yeah.
So they signed that big deal, and from that, it's mushroomed up, and now ESPN has gotten heavily involved in it,
Mhm.
and they've done very well. But as you say, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, boxing has done a terrible job of promoting the proper fights.
Because they never fight each other.
Yeah, how can you fight? How can you promote something that doesn't exist?
And you also have cross promotions where you
Right,
have Golden Boy and you have
right,
some of the other, and they never want to fight each other because they don't want to give the satisfaction of letting the other company have the potential winning
right.
fighter. And it's
Mhm.
because there's basically just a gridlock where these guys don't want to fight each other because
Right,
the companies and the promoters refuse to potentially lose in this
right,
head-to-head matchup against other promoters. And
right.
I hate it. That's why I kind of fell out of boxing.
We need another Don King. What can we tell you? So
Better money management, but the same concept.
yeah,
A manager who can oversee a ton of fighters and would actually encourage them
mhm,
to fight against each other.
yep. And someone who always likes to have a very deep bench of
Yep.
fighters. So
True.
there you go. Any final thoughts, boys and girls out there? I don't see anything we haven't talked about. Do you, there, Scotty?
Not really.
Okay.
Should be a good game.
Yeah.
I got myself a hot dog behind me once I find a
Right.
vendor. But besides that, though, yeah, I know that originally we were planning on going through a little bit of college
Mm-hmm.
football. Did not
Mm-hmm.
exactly work out, so I guess we're going to end up merging both them for Friday.
Sure.
Probably mostly NFL tomorrow because I'm doing the
Right.
college show with Steen. So
Okay.
expect NFL breakdowns. I'll probably have some parlays mixed in with some NFL stuff.
There you go.
But other than that, though, until next time, same time tomorrow, over here at the Max Wagers Network. Good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.
Bye.